Father God, we just thank you so much for who you are and how you are in our lives. And with all this technology, we're just so grateful that we can join together from all over. I know we have international too, joining in, and we can come together, spend some time learning about how you created us in relationships through that science, Lord, that you invented. You're the author, perfecter, and finisher of it all. So we just ask that you just bless this time, that you give us eyes to see, ears to hear, and hearts to receive all that you have for us. And we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
So, Father, right now, I'm just so grateful, Michael, that you're here. And I wanted to give a introduction that if you guys don't know Michael, he's definitely one of our fan favorites here. He's so willing to share with us. He's very gracious with his time and his knowledge and his insights. But he is the founder and president of Crossways Life Coaching. He is an author, speaker, coach, mentor, and trainer. He has a master's in education and a small amount of about 4,200 hours of coaching businesses and individuals. He partners with Christians in midlife around career development, performance, and transitions. He also mentors the new coaches around skill and business development. He developed an interest in neuroscience through the work he does to help clients get unstuck, which often centers on mindsets and beliefs. So along with his coaching practice, he serves as the instructor for PCCI. So some of you probably recognize him from there. And you can always find out more about him through his Crossways Life Coaching?
Crossways Life Coaching, yeah.
Yep,
So
okay,
I'll
perfect.
share that on my screen here. Yeah.
All right, well, go ahead and take it away, Michael.
Very good. And thank you for that, Susan. So it is good to see, as I said, some familiar faces, some new faces. So good to see everyone, and hope this can be somewhat interactive. We'll have some questions for you, asking you for your input or feedback. So it's just not me talking. That would be very boring and ho-hum dry. So we don't want that. So we're going to look at today is the neuroscience behind effective relationships. And so as we jump in here, it's probably good to just think about why this particular topic anyway. So one of the most fundamental things that we as human beings live with are relationships. So we're in relation with family members, neighbors, coworkers, church community. We have all kinds of relationships going on. Clerk at the local grocery store, just day-to-day interactions. So we're always in some kind of relationship. But as much as we have relationship, we often lack understanding of how to have effective relationships. There's no manual that we were born with. There's no instructions that we can just pick up sometimes, and especially given the diversity of people and individuals, temperaments, personalities, all that. So the presentation today, I thought here is to unpack the brain science behind having effective relationships using a model that was introduced by David Rock in his book, Your Brain at Work. And so as we jump in, I want to talk about the agenda. So today we're going to look at, first of all, understanding threats and things that how our brains work with regards to that. Then we're going to do an overview of this model that David Rock put together called the SCARF model, and look at each of these areas and think about how they impact relationship dynamics. And then we're going to actually explore one of them, which is the first area, which is status. So we're going to drill into that particular part of the model somewhat. And then the last thing we'll be doing is any takeaways, questions, and mention a class where you can learn more about this called Coaching and the Brain. And we'll share that at the end. So as we jump in and get started, I love using a slide to sort of explain just in general what's going on with us and with our brains. So this quote at the top says, everything you do in life is based on your brain's determination to minimize danger or maximize reward. So whenever we experience any situation, anything going on, our brain's first thing, it just defaults to, okay, is this something I should be aware of as a danger, or is this safe? Is it something I should be concerned about? Or is this going to be okay? And so it doesn't matter whether that's a situation you find yourself in your environment, or people in a conversation. It's constantly scanning and trying to make that decision. And so basically what happens is any stimulus that comes to us is coming through our brain stem down here and travels through our limbic system. And the limbic system, you might know, is that place where there's emotions that kick in. So these emotions are going to trigger either, again, a threat response or a reward response based on how much we interpret whether this is a danger or not. And so if we feel threatened, whether it's body language, tone of voice, whatever that is, our body is going to have a threat response, and we're going to get defensive, and we're going to act defensive, and we're going to show up that way with people. If we feel safe, then we're going to be like, oh, drawn to it. We're going to be open. We're going to have more happy hormones and a smile and all that, versus the back off, I feel threatened by you kind of response. And so as we think about this response as well, one of the things that's really important to realize is it's not just because everything seems scary to everyone. Now, obviously, if you have a grizzly bear with its claws over you and its mouth wide open, I think all of us can discern that's scary, right? So we all are universally agreed about that. Versus some situations where, because of our environment, because of the house or the household in which we were born, or geography in which we were born, where we grew up, these kind of things all influence our interpretation of threat or reward. And so where somebody could see, let's say, a medium-sized dog walking up to you, and you can't quite tell, oh, I remember when I was little, a dog biting me or something happened, you might feel threatened. Whereas somebody else gets down on one knee and is smiling, arms open, saying, oh, it's, come over here, let me pet you. So we can have the exact same experience, just two different responses. And that's based on, again, what's happened in our life in the past. So it's a simple thing, but yet there is these complex pieces to it as well. So that's important to keep that in mind. All right, so as we move from there, and we're going to jump in and then talk about this SCARF model of threats and rewards. So you'll notice this is a same kind of thing going on here. You have an away response or a towards response that could go on. And so there's 5 areas, and this is, again, a model that was put together by a guy named David Rock. He's a research scientist around brain science. And he talks about 5 things in his research that, as he began studying people and groups over the years, he was able to discern there's 5 big areas it seems like people experience these threat or reward responses. And the 5 that he has identified here are status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And so when any one of these is being built up, so you feel like your status is being enhanced, you feel a toward response towards that person, or object, whatever it might be. If we feel threatened by it, we feel an away response. And so as we look at these, the idea of status is you can maybe use some questions or some statements to help you discern, okay, what does this status mean? So if use it as a question, the question would be that people are asking is, am I valuable? Am I valuable? Do I have value? Of course, we can use an affirmation statement and say, I am valuable, and affirming ourselves. But the status question is, do you feel I'm valuable or I have value? The certainty is do I know where I stand with you, with a situation, whatever it is. And again, saying it as a statement is, I know where I stand. The autonomy is, I have a choice, or as a question, do I have a choice? How much choice or autonomy or freedom do I have? Now, with all of these, there is some level of too much and not enough, right? So thinking about certainty, if everything in your life is just totally predictable, well, there's some nice things about being predictable, but if everything's predictable, it's going to be very boring and ho-hum, right? So you need some variety, uncertainty, to make life, give it a little spice and a little zest. Same thing with autonomy. You don't, as much as we want some autonomy and freedom, and that goes on a spectrum, some people need more, some people need less, but everybody needs some, but not full autonomy, because then you really don't know what they're doing. In fact, that's one of the biggest complaints sometimes by workers is, hey, I'm really not sure what I'm supposed to be doing. Not getting clear direction from my manager or boss. Relatedness, and this goes with the same idea of relationship, but relatedness is, do I belong? Do I belong with this group? Do I belong and fit in with this family or organization, or in this relationship, whatever it happens to be? So do I fit? Do I belong? And then the last one is fairness. And fairness is, am I being treated with respect? And that whole idea when kids were little, and if you had kids, or maybe you do have kids who are little, the whole idea that somebody got one more cookie than somebody else, or when somebody else's piece of cake is a little bigger than the other person's. Well, that's not fair, right? So we get all upset about that. And so as adults, same kind of things can happen. We get into a work environment and somebody gets able to leave, let's say 30 minutes earlier, and you're like, hey, that's not fair, why can they leave and I can't? Or again, somebody else's view or place in the office is better than yours. There's a million reasons why adults act the same way as children. So this is the SCARF model. So I want to pause here, since I've been talking now for 15 minutes or whatever it seems, and want to give you all a chance to give some input or thoughts around this. So think of the key 2 or 3 relationships you have in your life. The key 2 or 3 relationships. So it could be spouse, children, coworkers, people that you interact with a lot. It could be a neighbor, whatever. And think about these 5 areas, and I'm going to invite some feedback here. Where do you see the area that you feel like there's the best possibility to improve for you and for that relationship? So that's one question. And then the other question's going to be, where do you feel like you're doing really well with that relationship? Which one of these? So love to get some input or feedback, but think about, again, top 2 or 3 relationships, and pick one of them. And where do you feel like you're doing? We'll start out with the doing well in these. So
Yeah, go ahead and unmute if you
yes, please.
have something to
Want
say. Yeah,
this to be
please.
interactive. There's not enough of us. Please feel free to unmute, even if you don't want to come off. Come on the video and be able to hear your input. So who wants to go first?
You can always type it in the chat and I'll read it out for you too. Nobody's in relationships?
Well, I love these universal topics, but you know,
I'll say
everybody's
something,
in
I guess.
relationships.
I can say something.
There you go. Thanks,
I don't know
Jim.
if I'm getting this right or not, but I was just thinking, like you said, in terms of like my relationships, my family relationships, I think with my wife, for example, autonomy is a big one. We're both very independent. And I think that is something that has been a lifelong, well, for 30 plus years, since however long we've been married, you know. So with my kids, I think it's the relatedness, and also some of the certainty. Where do I stand with them?
Mhm.
They're adult
Mhm.
kids now, and, you know, kind of walking that as fairly newly empty nesters. How do you walk that path with them and feel confident that you're in the right space with them? So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, good. Thanks, Tim. Thanks for kicking us off here.
Mhm.
Who else?
Kimberly wrote in the chat here, the relatedness, we connect and know, her spouse and kids belong to each other and to God's family. So that's a great
Okay.
example of relatedness. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a relatedness. Thanks, Kimberly. Who else? Where do you feel like you're doing good in your
Yeah,
relationship?
I have a question, Michael.
Yes.
Marian speaking. How does this model relates to my relationship to myself? Because it's also a type of relationship. Every person has some sort of relationship with himself or herself. And this is just a returning question. How would this model apply if I want to help a client, a coaching client, for example, if there is a problem accepting himself or herself? Would this relate in any way, or have you come across this perspective?
Yeah, I think I've used it more with interpersonal relationships, of course, versus an individual. But when you look at the questions, or that's why I gave you those statements, I am valuable, I know where I stand, I have a choice, I belong, I'm treated with respect. You could certainly ask that of yourself. Do I see myself as valuable? Do I see myself as knowing where I stand? Do I see myself as having choice? You can ask those kind of questions of yourself and write down the list. And then depending on the answer people get, okay, what's going on there and what do you want to do about it, right? So what's the belief you have that's telling you that maybe you're not valuable, whatever. Does that help?
Yeah, I thank you. Yeah, I realized that I can create threat towards myself depending on the type of answer I give to these questions. Yeah, thank you very much. This is revealing.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to talk about status more, but that's what you're referring to. Yeah. People are nervous about giving an answer because they don't want their status to go down. They want to know that everybody thinks they're brilliant, right? We all want that. So absolutely.
Thank you.
The perfect petri dish for all of that. Barb put in the chat, she says, I have uncertainty in my job. Therefore, I find that I hold back in taking initiative and feel that I am not contributing as much or as well as I could.
Okay, yeah, great example. Great example. Is it Karen or Karine or?
It's Karim.
Yes.
Made me think of just because of Mr. Kubis relationship, not with myself, but with God. My relationship with him, because then am I valuable? I would say that's one I struggle with, like what's God's view of me,
Yeah.
how I perceive God's view of me. So we can go through the list on those ones. It talks to me.
Absolutely. Great. Yeah, great.
Mhm,
The spiritual application. Absolutely. And that's why this is just so universal and helpful. And that's part of, I think, why in his research he saw this coming up. So, yeah. All right, good. And anybody willing to risk your status and share maybe what's an area that you might want to develop or get better? You don't have to tell us with whom, but is there a growing point for you?
Everybody's going to pass on that one, I think, Michael.
No problem. So yeah, so use this as a tool because, and we'll talk about this as we continue to go on. All right, so let's talk about status. So that's the first one. It's the only one we're going to dive into today. So it's interesting, and David Rocks, so he talks about people pay a lot of attention to protecting and building their status, probably more than any other element of the SCARF model. So can you believe that? Is that believable? Yes. You know, people will go to great lengths to protect their status and how others think of them. Naomi Eisenberg, a researcher at UCLA, did a study which showed that 5 different pain regions actually light up in the brain under social pain. And in other words, social pain can be as painful as physical pain, as the two appear synonymous to the brain. So the social pain of not feeling like you measure up, or that you're valuable, or that people hold you in high esteem, lights up the brain region, which is, we talked about, you know, with the threat. So that's a threat response. And so we're going to do whatever we can to not go there. So questions that we might ask somebody to light up that part is, why did you do that? So that's a real popular one, right? So asking people, why did you do that? Or better yet, with your kids, you're going to get a certain response for sure. Or let's say, can I give you some feedback? Susan, can I give you some feedback? Not really, not interested. No, thanks.
Exactly. The first thing that brings up is it's not going to be good.
Exactly. So, but yeah, that's what often takes place, right? Let's give you some feedback. You really, you know, got this webinar started great, but boy, oh boy, what you did when you, you know, monitor the chat room, oof, work on that. But hey, I know you're going to land this thing well, right? So whatever. So we try to give the feedback sandwich. No, that doesn't work either. So, yeah, so give it some feedback, or comparing people to others. You know, you should try to be more like so-and-so. And again, this happens within families, but it can happen within work environment. Boy, I wish everybody worked as hard as, you know, Joe or whatever. And so that's always then felt as a put down. So people pay a lot, and it can definitely light up social or the pain regions of the brain. The other thing is people work hard to avoid being wrong. One of the things, and Susan, you sort of touched on it, is the limbic system always thinks pessimistically at first. It always thinks about the negative / threat side before the positive reward side. And so people want to work hard at being wrong, and they'll do just about anything. So justifying, trying to spin it, trying to explain whatever their thing is. And this is just, on, you think about social media and the impacts of that, and status are huge, and where people don't want to appear to be wrong or not fit into the crowd, or things like that, which we talked about, with fitting in and do I belong, that kind of stuff, really is huge. A perceived drop in status can take a life of its own, and believe it or not, last for years. If somebody feels slighted and they feel like their status has dropped, that can really take a hold in them and just simmer and fester there even for years. And you may know of some situations in relationships where family members that might have happened and they weren't able to deal with it, and they haven't dealt with it well. And so it's eating away at them, and then they always look for ways to sort of let out that bitterness or anger. So this idea of status is a really big thing to make sure it's safeguarded in relationships. Being right is often more important to people than just about anything else, including money, health, and relationships. So many arguments and conflicts at work and in life have status issues at their core. And when everyone is vying for top status, relationships naturally will go down. If everybody's trying to one up somebody else, the relationships are going to definitely go down. So let's ask a question here. If you think about an instance where you recall someone affirming your status, affirming your value, we'll go with that angle. What was that like for you, and what difference did that make for you, as far as like a longer term kind of difference? Somebody affirmed you, somebody's let you know you are valuable. And I hope you have some examples of that in your life. But who would be willing to share?
I could share an example.
Thanks, Kimberly.
I think back to actually when I first started working out of college, and I was at a job where I was new and a student and didn't really think I could go very far. And I mean, at that time, and there was a job posting for like a training advisor, and I thought, oh my goodness, a job in the I was in the government already, and I thought I'd love a job like that, but I could never do that. And my manager at the time was like, why couldn't you? And just kind of pushed back and said, yeah, you could do that. You should apply. And it was funny because it was, just those little words of encouragement. Just because I haven't done it or I didn't have experience didn't mean I couldn't do it. And I did eventually get that job. So it did make a difference.
Very nice. Yeah, terrific. And so having a manager like that believing in you.
Mm-hmm.
And what difference did that make long term for you, Kimberly?
Oh, it's so many ways. Like I think that propelled me forward to believe I could do pretty much whatever I wanted. And I did well. I mean, it was interesting because at first when I applied for the job, I didn't get it. And then I asked for a post interview just to say, well, what can I do next time if I didn't do it well this time, because I'd really like a job like that. And they ended up saying, you know what, we have an extra position. And so they gave me the job, and I ended up going from like not getting the job to when they posted it permanently to being at the top of the list. And so I was even able to see myself go from not making the job to being the top. And it was just, it was instrumental in everything going forward.
Wow. Very good. Yeah. So So the power of people believing, yeah, and saying that. So that's great. Great example. And then Allison is mentioning, I finished a big bike race. And when I crossed the finish line, a friend was there with a huge bouquet of balloons. Totally unexpected. I'll never forget that she thought enough of me to get the balloons and drive an hour to the finish line. So, wow, what a tremendous example there again of building up status. And we have opportunities, of course, to do that with those around us, right? So let's, speaking of that, let's talk about some use cases. So how can you, and definitely needs to have some feedback, so it's not just a handful of us, please chime in. We want to hear from as many of you as you can. How can you minimize threats when talking with others at work, home, church, community? What can you do to minimize the status threat there? These are going to be application use cases.
I'll get us rolling here. A couple of the things that I think about here is the language that you use, and the tone when you're speaking with someone matters a whole lot more than, like you said, that criticism sandwich. That's not effective, because even if you say something positive on the front end and positive on the back end, all I'm going to hear is the negative in the middle.
Yes. Yeah. Very good. So the words, the tone. Yeah.
Well, so,
Go ahead. Yeah.
explaining proactively what my good intention is, so that it doesn't leave a doubt in the person's mind. It's cleared from the get-go. Then the person can relax and receive it as such.
Okay. Very good. So share what your good intentions are. Who else?
Pam said in the chat, call out and reinforce strengths that matter in the situation or project by itself with example.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah. And noticing, hey, you really are doing a good job with that. Or I notice you really worked hard and it's paying off for you with, or whatever, reinforcing the positive, reinforcing what you want to see. Marion.
Yeah, I'm just thinking if we can apply this to a coaching conversation. If we explain to the coachee, why am I asking a difficult question? When I give the reason, I would like to ask you because I feel this is important for you. If you want to answer, and then I ask the question, would this be the proper use of minimizing threat on the coachee side?
Yeah, and it probably helps to prepare their brain, right, for what you're going to say. Hopefully they know they can trust you up, at that point. You don't want to ask probably too much of a difficult question in your first conversation, but just preparing them to be able to be open and receive it without the response of their stress hormones kicking in and sort of shutting them down anyway. So yeah, a good example. All right, let's do next use case. Did we have another chat?
Yeah, Pam put in, permission is so respectful and reduces stress.
Yeah.
Great point.
Next one, what warning signs should you look out from others that they might feel threatened by you? What kind of warning signs?
I would say probably that really like the automatic defensive posture and language that they come up with, and they try and deflect.
Or body language.
Yes. Nonverbals, yeah, say more about that, right? So maybe leaning back, arms crossed instead of leaning in. Yeah. What other threats or warning signs? I mean, got the nonverbals. From their own getting elevated in their response, right? Raising their voice, getting becoming argumentative or whatever. So these are all warning signs that whatever is going on there is threatening them. So yeah. And defensiveness, yes. All right, next one. Those who work with couples. So I don't know if you coach couples, work with couples, and this could be couples, whether they're married or in dating relationship. I'm coaching a couple right now, and they're in a dating relationship, so it's a lot of fun. How does this show up for them? How does the idea of status and trying to minimize, and it could be any of the scarf things really, but focusing on status, how could that be something to address in a coaching relationship with couples? Does anybody do work with couples?
Yeah, I do work with couples quite often with my wife, and one thing that I notice when one of the couple is saying something that the other disagrees with, they are correcting or objecting or jumping into the discussion. This is how they protect the status.
Yes. Great example. Thank you, Marion. Yep. Anybody else want to add to that?
Well, I guess if somebody doesn't want to apologize out of pride, it's to protect their status as well.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and one of the things, so Marion, I don't know how you work with couples, but one of the tools that I found that helps with some of this is it's the Stephen Covey Indian talking stick idea. But what they're behind that, what it is whoever's holding the stick is allowed to share what they want to share completely, and the other person listening needs to be able to summarize or state back in a summary what they're hearing so that the person feels really heard. And then they trade and the other person gets the stick and they swap roles. And so doing that can really be very helpful with couples to be able to help them deal with realizing, hey, I need to express who I am, but also be a great listener, not just a great talker and explainer of myself and justifying what I'm doing. So I found that to be really a helpful tool. All right, and then the last example we're going to use here, those who manage or coach or managers or teams in the business sector. What implications are there for those in the business sector? A whole lot of them. Guarding status.
I mean, I think feedback, again, going back to feedback, is a big plays into it a lot with either not knowing how to give feedback, giving it in the wrong way, and then causing more confusion or defensiveness. So yeah, I think feedback's a big one.
Okay, yeah, feedback and
or lack thereof.
Yeah, how it's given and the environment in which it's given. Yes. So building on that a little bit, Tim, what kind of keys are helpful then that you found, and anybody else can feel like they want to chime in? with giving feedback to a person who's you're managing or supervising?
I heard recently asking the person themselves what they found that they did well or need to improve, because it opens up a little bit more and they might have already realized things, but it shows an open attitude.
Yeah. So what did you do? Yeah. What did you do well on that? What would you do differently? How could you improve? Yeah. Who else? Go ahead, Mark.
I encourage people to look for a ratio of 3 or 6 to 1 good things for everything they want to give criticism on. High performing teams, but also high performing people will catch themselves doing things well 6 times as often. And to pick up on Corinne's point, the strongest voice in most people's head is a negative voice. So you don't have to actually really typically give criticism. They already know that what you've got to do is really build them up.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's sort of the antithesis of what is often in the normal way. It's 6, 7 criticisms to 1 positive. And so no wonder people don't receive the feedback well.
When I'm coaching leaders, they'll talk about something that somebody dropped the ball on. I'm like, okay, good. That's 1. Come up with 6 to offset that. And they can't. I'm like, okay, so then you can't talk about that one. And that sort of level sets them back to, is this one really that important to focus on if you can't find 6 things they're doing well?
Yeah. Yeah. Challenge them. All right. Very good. Well, we are going to wrap up here, but wanted to mention, so I actually have a class, so this is just like a little nugget out of this class that's called Coaching in the Brain. It actually started yesterday, but you could still jump in because we record it. You could watch the class that you missed this week. And I've been teaching this now for about 6, 7 years, and have had lots of different people come through. The first person's feedback, Ruthie, she actually works as an executive coach with Michael Hyatt's organization. And I've had a coach from Dave Ramsey's Entree Leadership take it and say that him and the folks within his group there, other fellow coaches, are really got a lot from this and use it in their coaching. So, and that you don't have to just coach leaders. This works with anybody, of course. And then in August, we'll be doing another one of these webinars. So August 8th, 3 o'clock, CCNI coaching clients for peak performance. So want to jump in and learn a little bit more about coaching people around performance. Would love to see you in August. All right, so takeaways, questions. So first, and I will ask Susan, help me out here. Everybody share one takeaway, whether it's in the chat or feel, you can come off mute and just share it. But I'm going to stop sharing at this point. But love to hear your takeaway. But any questions before we do that? Anybody got a question? Something else you'd like to chime in on or even add to what we've said? All right, good. Good. So so why don't we go ahead and start with takeaways. So who would like to get us started? Thank you, Narinder. The importance of tone of voice. It's not always what you say, but how you say it. Yes. Huge. Good refresher on the SCARF model. Great explanation. Great. Thank you, Mark. Losing their attention on or engagement. Takeaway. People pay the most attention protecting status. Yes. Desperately. We want to look good. All those grooming products, all the stuff that we want so we can look good. Who else?
think for me, it was this, the reminder that a lot of times what you say to somebody bumps into their feeling, their status of their importance and so forth.
Yeah. Yeah. Across the board application, relationships, family, work, etc. Good. Very good, Tim. Who else? Barb, Pam, Kimberly.
There's a lot of inspiration for me in many respects, but I want to share something very personal. Going through this curve, the autonomy, reading the question, or I put down the question here, do I have a choice? I could immediately apply it to a situation I'm in. And this was a great, great relief, realizing that I do have a choice.
Yes.
So thank you very much, Michael, for this. Thank you for.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Mm.
Yeah, that's why I love to phrase it as
Mhm.
either a statement or a question,
Mhm.
because I think as you hear that perspectives, they can really make a big difference.
Mm.
Good. You're welcome, Marion. Enjoyed the examples. Being right is more important to people than almost everything. Yes. Yes, and yes, absolutely. Yes. And what I like about that is, yeah. All right, good. So, Susan, why don't I toss it back over to you and wrap things up?
Excellent. Michael, thank you so much. It's good. I find myself, okay, what's next? What's the next one? You know, I'm just such an avid learner of everything that you share. I really appreciate that. I thank you very much.
You're welcome. And it was great to hang out with all of you, and trust that we'll see you again soon. But blessings to you all. All right.
All right, great. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful week.